The arrival of starlight. The escape pod pierced Earth's atmosphere like a shooting star, leaving a trail of azure flames in its wake. Inside, Naira pressed her crystalline hands against the viewport, watching as Montana's snow-covered peaks rushed up to meet her. Her translucent skin pulsed with waves of fear induced bioluminescence, casting the pod's interior in a pale blue glow. The landing was anything but gentle. The pod skipped across frozen ground like a stone across water, finally coming to rest in a grove of towering pines. Steam hissed from the craft's ruptured cooling system, mixing with the crisp winter air to create an otherworldly fog. Naira waited until her racing heart slowed before attempting to move. Every muscle in her body ached from the impact, but her healer's training told her nothing was broken. She had survived, something the Keplerian High Council hadn't intended when they'd branded her a traitor for treating the sick regardless of their social status. The pod's hatch groaned open, letting in a blast of frigid air that made Naira gasp. On Kepler, the temperature never dropped below what humans would consider room temperature. This cold was alien to her in every sense of the word. She stumbled out into knee-deep snow, her traditional healer's robes offering little protection against the biting wind. The planet's higher gravity made each step feel like she was wearing weights. In the distance, she could see lights twinkling in what appeared to be a small settlement, but reaching it would mean crossing several miles of exposed terrain. Naira knew she had to try. The pod's emergency beacon was already broadcasting its location to any nearby ships, and it wouldn't be long before someone came to investigate. She couldn't risk being found by other Keplerians. They'd send her right back to face rehabilitation, a process few survived with their minds intact. She began walking, each step a struggle against the unfamiliar gravity and treacherous terrain. Her bioluminescence, typically a source of pride among her people, now felt like a beacon announcing her presence to anyone who might be watching. She forced herself to calm her emotions, dimming the telltale glow to barely a flicker. Hours passed as Naira pushed forward through the wilderness. The cold had long since numbed her extremities, and her vision was beginning to blur. Her people weren't built for these temperatures. Their crystalline cellular structure was designed for the warm, humid environment of Kepler. She needed shelter, and soon. A distant howl made her freeze in her tracks. Through the swirling snow, she caught glimpses of movement, local wildlife, no doubt, drawn to the strange creature stumbling through their territory. Naira's medical knowledge included basic information about Earth's fauna, enough to know that these were likely wolves, and they were hunting. She quickened her pace, though her legs felt like they were made of lead. The lights of the settlement seemed no closer than before, and the howls were getting nearer. Naira's heart pounded as she heard the soft crunch of paw prints in the snow behind her. Just ahead, she spotted what appeared to be an abandoned structure, some kind of storage building half buried in snow drifts. It wasn't much, but it might offer enough shelter to survive until daylight. Naira forced her frozen limbs to move faster, practically falling through the building's partially open door. Inside, the wind's howl was muffled but not silenced. Naira huddled in a corner, wrapping her arms around herself as she tried to conserve what little body heat she had left. Her bioluminescence had faded to almost nothing. A dangerous sign. If she couldn't get warm soon, her cellular structure would begin to crystallize. As consciousness began to fade, Naira's thoughts drifted to her home world. She'd known the risks of helping those deemed unworthy by the Council, but she couldn't have lived with herself if she turned them away. The healer's purpose was to heal. All life was precious, regardless of status or species. That belief had cost her everything, yet even now, she wouldn't change her decision. The last thing Naira heard before darkness took her was the sound of an approaching engine, cutting through the winter night like a beacon of hope, or perhaps doom. She was too far gone to know which, her crystalline form growing still as the cold tightened its grip. Sleep pulled at her consciousness, promising an escape from the cold and fear. As her eyes drifted shut, a final thought crossed her mind. She had traveled across the stars to find freedom, only to freeze to death in a stranger's shed. The irony might have made her laugh if she'd had the strength. But fate, it seemed, had other plans for the alien healer lost in Earth's wilderness. The engine sound grew closer, and with it, the chance of either salvation or discovery. Nigher, hearts in the frost. Finn O'Reilly didn't believe in coincidences. 20 years of treating wildlife in Montana's remote wilderness had taught him that everything happened for a reason. So when his truck's headlights caught a strange blue glow through the windows of his old storage shed, he knew it wasn't just the northern lights playing tricks. He'd been heading back from treating a wounded elk when he spotted it. The night was bitter cold, even by Montana standards, and the wind howled through the pines like a hungry beast. His first instinct was to keep driving. He had animals waiting at the clinic that needed attention, but something about that ethereal glow nagged at him. Finn pulled his truck to a stop, grabbed his medical bag and flashlight, and stepped out into the knee-deep snow. The beam of his light revealed unusual tracks leading to the shed, too light for a human, with an odd flowing pattern he'd never seen before. The door creaked as he pushed it open, his breath forming clouds in the freezing air. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness, and Finn's heart nearly stopped. Huddled in the corner was a creature unlike anything he'd ever seen. Her form was vaguely humanoid, but her skin was translucent, with a faint crystalline quality that seemed to catch and reflect his flashlight's beam. What he'd mistaken for the northern lights was actually a dim blue glow emanating from within her body, a glow that was growing fainter by the second. Finn's medical training kicked in, overriding his shock. He knelt beside the alien figure, noting how her skin had taken on an icy sheen. Her breathing was shallow, and when he touched her wrist to check for a pulse, her skin was cold as glass. She was dying. "Hey," he called softly, trying not to startle her. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, silver irises with no pupils, and focused on him with obvious fear. She tried to speak, but only a weak whisper emerged in a language he didn't understand. "I'm here to help," Finn said, keeping his voice steady as he shrugged off his heavy coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. "I'm a doctor. Well, a veterinarian. But right now that'll have to do." The alien woman seemed to understand his intent, if not his words. She stopped trying to pull away, though her body remained tense. Finn noticed how her crystalline fingers trembled as she clutched his coat closer. "I have a clinic nearby," he explained, gesturing toward his truck. "Warm, safe. Will you let me take you there?" She studied his face for a long moment, those silver eyes seeming to peer straight into his soul. Then, slowly, she nodded. Finn helped her to her feet, supporting most of her weight as they made their way through the snow. Her body was surprisingly light, almost delicate, and he could feel a faint vibration coming from within her, like crystal singing at a frequency just below human hearing. Getting her into the truck was a challenge. Every movement seemed to cause her pain, and her limbs had grown rigid with cold. Once she was settled in the passenger seat, Finn cranked up the heater to full blast and pulled back onto the road. As they drove, he kept glancing at his unusual passenger. The warmth from the heater was having an effect. Her skin was becoming more translucent, less icy, and the blue glow within her was growing stronger. She had her face turned toward the vent, eyes closed in what looked like relief. The clinic was dark when they arrived, just as he'd left it. Finn helped her inside, guiding her past the kennels where his regular patients slept. A few of the animals stirred at their passing, but none raised an alarm, something that struck him as odd, given how territorial they usually were with strangers. He settled her in his office, on the old couch he kept for those nights when he needed to monitor a critical patient. Under the bright fluorescent lights, he could see her more clearly. Her features were almost human, but there was an otherworldly grace to them that no earthborn creature could match. "I need to check your condition," he said, reaching for his medical bag. "Is that okay?" She nodded again, watching with interest as he pulled out his stethoscope. When he pressed it to her chest, his eyes widened in surprise. Instead of one heartbeat, He heard two distinct rhythms, perfectly synchronized. The alien woman must have seen his expression because she placed her hand over his and moved the stethoscope slightly to the left. The second heartbeat became clearer. Then she spoke, her voice stronger now that she was warming up. 2 hearts. "You speak English?" Finn asked, surprised. "Some," she replied carefully, as if testing each word. "Learn from signals, space signals, radio and television broadcasts." Finn realized. "You've been studying us." She nodded, then pressed her hand to her chest. "Naira," she said. "I am Naira." Finn O'Reilly, he responded automatically, still trying to process everything that was happening. Here he was, in his rural veterinary clinic, having a conversation with an alien who'd learned English from TV broadcasts. It sounded like the setup to a bad joke. But there was nothing funny about the fear he saw in those silver eyes, or the way she kept glancing at the windows as if expecting something terrible to appear. She was running from something. That much was clear. "You're safe here," he found himself saying. "Whatever you're afraid of, it won't find you." Naira's expression softened slightly, but her voice remained tense. "Others will come. Looking, must not stay long. Others like you." She nodded grimly. "Not friends. Hunters." Finn thought about that as he continued his examination. Her body temperature was still dangerously low by human standards, though he had no way of knowing what was normal for her species. Her crystalline skin was becoming more flexible as she warmed up, and the blue glow within her had strengthened to a steady pulse. "Well, you're not going anywhere tonight," he said firmly. "You need rest and warmth. We can figure out the rest tomorrow." Naira looked like she wanted to protest, but exhaustion was clearly overtaking her. Her eyelids drooped, and the glow beneath her skin dimmed to a soft nightlight blue. "Sleep," Finn said, draping a heated blanket over her. "You're safe here." As he watched her drift off to sleep, Finn wondered what he'd gotten himself into. Harboring an alien fugitive hadn't been on his agenda when he'd headed out to treat that elk. But looking at Naira's peaceful face, he knew he couldn't have done anything else. Sometimes, he reflected, the most important choices in life weren't choices at all. They were simply the moments when we decided to be who we really were. Dawn broke over the Montana wilderness, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold. Finn stood at his clinic's window, coffee in hand, watching as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the trees. Behind him, he could hear the soft breathing of his unusual guest. Naira lay curled on the office couch, her crystalline form casting rainbow patterns on the walls as the morning light struck her translucent skin. The blue glow within her pulsed steadily now, stronger than it had been the night before. She looked peaceful, but Finn knew the moment she woke, the hard questions would begin. A whimper from one of the recovery kennels drew his attention. The injured wolf pup he'd been treating had developed a fever overnight, and its condition was deteriorating despite his best efforts. As he turned to check on it, he heard Naira stir. "Someone hurts," she said softly, her silver eyes opening. "I feel it." Finn nodded toward the kennels. "Wolf pup, caught in a trap. The wound's infected, and antibiotics aren't helping." Naira rose gracefully, her movements fluid now that she had recovered from the cold. "May I see?" He hesitated only a moment before leading her to the kennel. The pup lay on its side, breathing labored, its injured legs swollen and hot to the touch. Naira knelt beside the cage, her expression softening as she studied the small creature. "On my world," she said, her English careful but improving. "I was healer. May I help?" Finn considered the request. He'd exhausted his conventional options, and the pup was failing. "What would you do?" Instead of answering, Naira placed her hand against the kennel's wire door. The blue glow within her intensified, focusing in her palm. The pup, which had been restless with pain, suddenly grew still, its eyes fixed on the crystalline woman. "He trusts," Naira said. "Will you open?" Finn unlatched the kennel, and Naira reached inside. gently placing her glowing hand on the pup's injured leg. The blue light seemed to flow from her fingers into the wound. The pup didn't flinch or try to bite. It lay perfectly still, watching Naira with ancient eyes. Minutes passed in silence. Finn watched in amazement as the swelling visibly reduced, the angry red of infection fading to healthy pink. When Naira finally withdrew her hand, the pup's breathing had eased, and it was sleeping peacefully. "How did you?" Finn began, but his voice trailed off as he saw Naira sway slightly. He caught her arm, steadying her. "Are you all right?" "Healing takes energy," she explained, leaning against him for support. "Need rest, but pup will live." He helped her back to the couch, noting how the glow within her had dimmed. "That's why they exiled you, isn't it? Because you used your healing abilities to help others." Naira nodded, her expression distant. "On Kepler, healing is controlled, only for worthy ones. But pain knows no status. I could not watch others suffer." Before Finn could respond, a truck engine rumbled in the distance. Naira tensed, her glow flickering with fear, but Finn recognized the sound. "It's okay," he assured her. "That's just Thomas. He brings supplies once a week." He paused, thinking quickly. "Stay here, stay quiet. I'll handle it." Thomas Reynolds had been delivering to the clinic for 15 years, and he was as reliable as the sunrise. He was also the biggest gossip in 3 counties. Finn met him at the door, accepting the weekly shipment of medical supplies while deflecting questions about why he was still in yesterday's clothes. Through the window, he caught glimpses of Naira watching, her form barely visible against the office shadows. Thomas seemed oblivious, more interested in sharing the latest town rumors, including strange lights in the sky 2 nights ago. "Probably just the northern lights," Finn said casually, signing for the delivery. "Maybe," Thomas replied. "But Sheriff Willis got some calls about weird tracks in the snow up near your storage shed. Might want to keep an eye out for anything unusual." "Will do," Finn promised, breathing a sigh of relief as Thomas finally drove away. When he returned to the office, he found Naira examining his veterinary textbooks with fascination. "Your healing methods," she observed, "they are different, but the goal is same. To ease suffering." "That's right," Finn agreed, sitting beside her. "Though I've never seen anything like what you did with that pup." Naira traced the diagram of a dog's anatomy with one crystalline finger. "Perhaps we could learn from each other while I am here." The request surprised him, but as he considered it, it made sense. She was a healer at heart, just as he was, and if she was going to be hiding here, she might as well make herself useful. "I'd like that," he said, "but we'll need to be careful. This is a small town, and people notice things." "Like lights in sky?" she asked, with a hint of humor in her silver eyes. "Exactly." He smiled. "We'll need a cover story for why you're here, and you'll need different clothes. Those robes are a bit conspicuous." Over the next few hours, they developed a plan. To anyone who asked, Naira would be a research veterinarian from abroad, studying alternative healing methods. Her unusual appearance would be explained as a rare genetic condition, strange enough to account for her looks, but not so strange as to invite too many questions. As they worked together throughout the day, Finn found himself increasingly impressed by Naira's knowledge and gentle touch with the animals. She seemed to have an innate understanding of their needs, and they responded to her presence with unusual trust. By evening, the wolf pup was not only fever-free but standing and taking tentative steps. Other patients showed marked improvement after Naira's subtle interventions, though she was careful not to use her abilities too obviously. "You're good at this," Finn observed as they shared a simple dinner in his office. "Working within limitations, I mean." "Had practice," she replied. "On Kepler, healing was watched. Had to be creative." She paused, studying her food with interest. "This is good. What is called?" "Macaroni and cheese," he laughed. "Not exactly fine dining." "Is warm," she said simply. "Is shared. That makes it good." Looking at her in the fading daylight, Finn realized how quickly he'd grown accustomed to her presence. The otherworldly glow, the crystalline skin, the musical quality of her voice. It all seemed natural now, just part of who she was. But as night fell and the clinic grew quiet, reality crept back in. Somewhere out there, hunters were looking for her. Sooner or later, they would come. The question was, when they did, would this small Montana town become Naira's sanctuary or her trap? When storms break. The first sign of trouble came 3 weeks after Naira's arrival. Finn was in the middle of a routine checkup on a farmer's horse when Sheriff Willis's patrol car pulled into the clinic's driveway, kicking up clouds of snow in its wake. Through the barn window, Finn watched as 2 black SUVs followed close behind. The vehicles had government plates, and the men who stepped out wore dark suits despite the freezing temperature. His heart sank. He'd been dreading this day. Inside the clinic, Naira was treating a pregnant cat, her gentle hands glowing softly as she monitored the developing kittens. They'd worked out a system over the past weeks, combining her unique abilities with conventional veterinary medicine in ways that had produced remarkable results. Word had spread about the miraculous recoveries at Finn's clinic, drawing patients from increasingly distant towns. "Naira," he called softly from the barn door. "We have company." She looked up, her silver eyes widening as she sensed his concern. The glow beneath her crystalline skin dimmed to almost nothing, a defensive reaction they'd discovered she could control. In the dim light of the clinic, she almost looked human, though her otherworldly beauty remained striking. "The hunters," she whispered. "Worse, government agents." Finn moved quickly, helping her to her feet. "We need to get you to the safe room. Now." They'd prepared for this possibility, converting an old root cellar beneath the clinic into a hiding place. It wasn't comfortable, but it was deep enough that standard scanners wouldn't detect her unique energy signature. Naira had just disappeared through the hidden entrance when a sharp knock echoed through the clinic. Finn took a deep breath, composed himself, and opened the door. Sheriff Willis stood there, looking uncomfortable, flanked by 2 stern-faced agents. "Dr. O'Reilly," one of the agents said, flashing a badge. "I'm Agent Morrison. This is Agent Chen. We're with a specialized division of Homeland Security. We need to ask you some questions about unusual activity in the area." Finn gestured them inside, maintaining a carefully neutral expression. "Of course, though I'm not sure how much help I can be." The agents moved through the clinic with practiced efficiency, their eyes scanning every corner. Agent Morrison pulled out a tablet, displaying a thermal image of the area around Finn's storage shed from 3 weeks ago. "We detected an unusual heat signature in this area," Morrison said, followed by reports of strange tracks and unexplained lights. "Would you know anything about that?" "Can't say that I do," Finn replied evenly. "Though the northern lights have been particularly active lately." "Dr. O'Reilly," Chen cut in, her voice sharp. "We've also received reports about miraculous recoveries at your clinic. Animals healing from injuries that should have been fatal. Care to explain that?" Finn shrugged. "I'm good at my job, and I've been experimenting with some alternative treatment methods." "With the help of your new research assistant?" Morrison asked. "The one nobody seems to have met, despite all the talk about her in town." Before Finn could respond, a commotion erupted outside. One of the government vehicles had picked up an energy reading. Agents swarmed the property, carrying sophisticated scanning equipment. Finn's heart raced, but he forced himself to remain calm. "This is a working veterinary clinic," he said firmly. "I have patients that need attention. If you have a warrant, show it. Otherwise, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Sheriff Willis, who had been quiet until now, stepped forward. "He's right. You can't just tear the place apart without proper authorization." Morrison's eyes narrowed. "Sheriff, this is a matter of national security. If you're interfering." "I'm upholding the law," Willis interrupted, "which applies to federal agents same as anyone else." The standoff might have continued, But at that moment, a cry of pain came from one of the recovery kennels. The pregnant cat had gone into labor 2 weeks early. Without Naira's stabilizing influence, the birth was becoming complicated. Finn moved to help, but he knew it was beyond his conventional medical abilities. The cat needed Naira's unique healing touch. He faced a terrible choice: maintain Naira's safety, or let an innocent creature and her unborn kittens die. Before he could decide, the choice was made for him. The hidden door swung open, and Naira emerged, her crystalline form glowing with determined purpose. "I cannot hide while life needs help," she said simply, moving past the stunned agents to the cat's side. The room fell silent as Naira worked, her hands emanating that soft blue light that had become so familiar to Finn. The agents raised their weapons, but Sheriff Willis stepped between them and Naira. "Lower those guns," he ordered. "Can't you see she's trying to help?" Minutes passed in tense silence. Finally, the sound of tiny mewling filled the air. 5 perfect kittens, all healthy, all alive against the odds. The mother cat purred contentedly as Naira stroked her head. "That's what you're afraid of?" Finn asked the agents quietly. Someone who would risk her own freedom to save a cat and her kittens. Morrison and Chen exchanged looks. Their weapons lowered slowly. "What are you?" Chen asked Naira. "I am healer," Naira replied, her silver eyes meeting the agents directly. "On my world, I was punished for helping those deemed unworthy. I came here hoping Earth would be different." She paused, her glow dimming slightly. Was I wrong? The question hung in the air, challenging not just the agents but humanity itself. In that moment, Finn realized they had reached a turning point, not just for Naira, but for all of human-alien relations. Their response would determine whether Earth would be known as a sanctuary for those seeking freedom, or just another world ruled by fear of the unknown. A place among stars. 6 months after the confrontation at the clinic, Naira stood at the window of her new laboratory, watching snow fall on the Montana mountains. The facility had grown from Finn's modest clinic into something extraordinary, the world's first joint human-alien medical research center. The transformation hadn't been easy. After that tense night with the government agents, there had been weeks of questioning, debates, and negotiations. But in the end, it was the evidence that proved impossible to ignore. Dozens of cases of seemingly miraculous recoveries, all documented with Finn's meticulous records. Agent Chen, who had started as their adversary, became their strongest advocate within the government. She had been there when Naira healed a dying child in the pediatric ward of the nearest hospital, a calculated risk that had changed everything. The sight of the alien healer using her abilities to save a human child had shifted the narrative from fear to hope. Still admiring the view, Finn's voice broke through her thoughts. He joined her at the window, 2 mugs of coffee in hand. She accepted one gratefully, having developed a fondness for the bitter earth beverage. "Thinking about changes," she replied. Her English had improved dramatically, though she still spoke with a melodic accent that made her words sound almost like music. "1 cycle of your sun ago, I was refugee. Now," she gestured at the facility around them. The laboratory was a blend of Earth technology and Keplerian healing principles. Crystal growth chambers lined one wall, cultivating the specialized minerals needed for her healing techniques. In the recovery wing, humans and animals alike benefited from the combined knowledge of 2 worlds. "Now you're revolutionizing medical science," Finn finished for her, smiling. "Though I still think you're working too hard." Naira's glow pulsed with amusement. She no longer needed to hide her natural bioluminescence, says Earth Doctor who sleeps in office. Their comfortable banter was interrupted by Dr. Patel, one of the human scientists who had joined their team. "You both need to see this," she said excitedly, holding up a tablet. "The latest results from the crystal integration trials. It's working." They had been attempting to create a way for human doctors to channel healing energies similar to Naira's abilities. The crystals, grown from samples of her own crystalline biology, showed promise as conduits for this energy. If successful, it would mean her healing gifts could be shared with healthcare workers around the world. Is this why ship approaching? Naira asked quietly, her glow dimming slightly. Finn and Dr. Patul looked up sharply. What ship? Keplerian vessel entered solar system yesterday, she explained. I feel them. They know I succeeded where they failed. The news should have been terrifying, but Naira's voice held no fear. Instead, there was a quiet confidence that hadn't been there when she first arrived on Earth. She moved to the center of the lab, her crystalline form casting rainbow patterns across the scientific equipment. They come because they must, she continued. Their way is failing. More of our people sicken each cycle. Pride keeps them from admitting truth, but need brings them here. Are we in danger? Dr. Patil asked. Naira shook her head. Not anymore. Earth has given me sanctuary, recognized by your world governments. And she smiled, her glow brightening. We have proof our way is better. As if on cue, the recovery ward door opened, and a young girl walked out, accompanied by her parents. The child had been paralyzed in an accident 3 months ago. Now she ran to Naira, wrapping her arms around the alien healer's crystalline form. Thank you, the girl's mother said, tears in her eyes. We never thought she'd walk again. Naira knelt to the child's level, her glow pulsing warmly. You did walking, she said softly. I only showed path. Later that evening, after the facility had quieted, Finn found Naira in their private research room. Star charts filled the holographic display, a gift from Agent Chen's department, showing the approaching Keplerian vessel. What will you say to them? He asked, standing close enough that their shoulders touched. Truth, Naira replied simply. That healing belongs to all. That strength comes not from control, but from sharing. She turned to face him, her silver eyes reflecting the starlight. That sometimes we must leave home to find where we truly belong. Finn understood the deeper meaning in her words. Over the months, their partnership had grown into something more. A connection that bridged the gap between their species. Neither of them had put it into words yet, but it was there in every shared smile, every quiet moment. When I found you in that shed, he said softly, I thought I was saving you. But really, you were saving us, showing us a better way. Naira's glow pulsed with emotion. We saved each other, she corrected. And now, perhaps, we can save more. The next morning, when the Keplerian ship appeared in the sky above Montana, it wasn't met with fear or weapons. Instead, they found a welcoming committee led by a crystalline woman whose glow rivaled the sun, standing beside a human doctor who had learned to see beyond appearances to the heart within. And as negotiations began for broader cooperation between their peoples, Naira and Finn stood together, their hands clasped, proving that the greatest healing of all comes not from medicine or magic, but from the simple act of choosing compassion over fear, understanding over ignorance, and love over prejudice. In the end, Naira had found more than sanctuary on Earth. She had found a home, a purpose, and a partner who shared her vision of a universe where healing knew no boundaries. And as she looked to the stars that had once seemed so cold and distant, she knew that this was just the beginning of a much larger story.